Good evening, friends, and welcome. I am Jeanette Jerzik, National Director of the She Said Project, and I am coming to you live from from a guest bedroom in my house that I've converted into my swanky new home office.
And I'm Carrie Rosso, co-founder of the She Said Project, and I'm coming at you live from my swagger wagon, in my driveway, and in my pink fuzzy robe, because this is the only place where I can be alone.
She Said is a place where women can come together and share stories, to laugh together and sometimes cry together, to be brave and vulnerable together.
What started as a live one-night show has grown into so much more. She Said is a community of women supporting women. And women. And more women. All the women's.
And it takes a community to put together an event like this. We'd like to thank our speakers who will be braving the microphone tonight, even if it is the microphone on their home computer.
And we want to thank you for joining us, because listening to one woman's story is honoring all women's stories.
And we need to thank our sponsor for making this event possible. As you see, I am now lounging in my gracious drawing room designed by the McGuire Home Collection. Joining us live is Nicole McGuire herself. Hi, Nicole.
Hello, I am Nicole McGuire, founder of the McGuire Home Collection. I am so happy to support the She Said Project as they present this fabulous showcase of women who are daring to be brave and vulnerable by sharing personal stories that will bring us together at a time we have all been feeling so far apart. At the McGuire Home Collection, we strive to empower women to create their best homes, live their best lives, and work in challenging and fulfilling careers. I personally invite you to be my date this evening. The show is about to get started. Come with me.
February 22nd, 2020. Just weeks before we found ourselves facing a global pandemic, the curtain closed on the 6th live That's What She Said show in Champaign, Illinois. The beloved community event has touched the lives of thousands of women through powerful, intimate performances by women you know and love. In 2019, the She Said movement picked up momentum and grew into more communities and reached new audiences through the She Said Project podcast. The mission is simple, exchanging stories, but the results are extraordinary. We have seen the power of women supporting women on stage, in our communities, and in our hearts. As 2020 continues to bring new challenges for us all to face, we strive to be a safe space for women's voices to be heard. We stand together for equality and justice. We celebrate the healthcare workers and each and every woman standing on the front line of the global pandemic. We look forward to businesses reopening and theaters turning their lights back on. But till then, we are going to keep finding ways to share women's stories, because together we are stronger, even when we are apart. Tonight, we are not limited by space and time. Tonight, our community is larger than ever before. Tonight, we present 7 women who will virtually blow you away. Please join us in welcoming your She Said Showcase speakers.
Allow me to paint you a picture. I'm 9 years old, 65 pounds, with bifocals that tinted in the sun. I've got a big perm and those good fluffy bangs that go, yeah, all kinds of 80s awesomeness. I'm strolling up to you with a big old smile and neon Jesus t-shirt. And you have never met me before. With a thrust out of my tiny hand, I say, "Hi, my name is Marie. Are you saved?" Yeah, big hit in the 6th grade. Raucous confidence, resilience since day one. Fast forward like 8 years and 3 business ventures, and I'm strolling into a Panera for another networking meeting. Coffee, chit chat, this and that. And I knew who he was before he even said my name. My heart knew. Marie Hale? He boomed. Jim Rosas. I've heard so many good things about you, but I expected you to be older. Oh no, I'm 45, I quipped. But I bathe in the blood of young children, and I really think it's starting to work. If I had known back then that he wasn't just a sales coach, but also a body language expert, I might have played it a little bit cooler. He caught my eyes darting around, and I caught his shiny, newly placed wedding ring. I was 6 months too late. Over the next 10 years, we built our businesses side by side. We had dinners together with his wife and my boyfriend, Raphael, and we built a friendship. Half torture and half the closest thing I could get. And so I stayed. After dating Raphael for 9 years with no hope of Jim ever leaving his wife, I got married, mostly because I was 30 and afraid that my eggs were old and trying to kill me. Raphael knew Jim was the love of my life. And he married me anyway. Jim didn't come to the wedding. A year and a half after that, when I was 4 months pregnant, Jim left his wife. All of those years of sitting next to him, the longing in every sense of my being taking over. And one day, we were on a plane to New York City for a day of client meetings. There was a lull in what was a very heated conversation in the room, and it just fell to silence. And the client, Jackie, quipped, "Did the two of you just have a conversation without speaking?" Yes. Yes, we did. I felt the flush take over my entire body, and I asked for a divorce at 6 o'clock that night. We got stuck in Queens that weekend for 3 days. There was a big old storm. We did nothing but swim in sheets and eat New York pizza in bed. And in that hotel room, we found nirvana and our home. Our adventures as a family began, and 3 years later, we opened a business together. And every morning, we would walk our little family to daycare with Lily holding his hand and chattering the whole way. We'd drop her off, and we'd hold each other's hand as we made it to the Brown line and took the train to our little one-person office that we loved so much. Of course, I had confidence. I had every dream I'd ever had come true. And then in one horrible afternoon in February, at 49, he left this world. He left us. I can still hear the sound of the body bag zipping and the echoes of my screams as I tried to find someone to take Lily so she wouldn't see. I was shattered. A million pieces of my soul poured out into nothing. And just like that, the dream was gone. But I had a business to keep going and a daughter to raise, and it was just me. It was just me and half a soul. And so I put on my red lipstick, bold lipstick, the kind that made everyone look at your mouth as you walk by. Because if they were looking at my lips, maybe they wouldn't look at my eyes. And if I didn't have confidence for the moment, then I would fake it. I would lean on my resilience to hold me together. I had 3 weeks to bury him and decide if I was going to take his role, teach his classes, and be the whole team in our family business, and to learn how to mourn publicly. Jackie O was one tough broad. I lined up doctors so that I wouldn't let that part of my life fall apart too. And it was, it was perfunctory. It was something that I could just check off a list. And I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I'm white. Like really white, like that kind of Canadian pale that nobody really aspires to. And so of course a dermatologist was on my list. And she took that little patch of dry skin that I've been asking doctors about for years and sent it to Florida, you know, where skin cancer is born. And 3 days later, I got the call. Basal cell serocarcinoma. Get in now. It was in the middle of my face, between my nose and my lip, and the world would never see me the same. A few weeks before my 38th birthday, they cut through my face over and over until a deep hole the size of a cigar butt was open on my lip. And if I hadn't lost my confidence then, I was at zero. And I didn't have my hero to hold me up. My legs wobbled as I walked back and forth from the operating room and back each time. And now I was physically being held. My mom was there, and my Laura, she had been my ride or die for almost 15 years now. And she made sure I knew that die was not an option. They told me my lips would never look the same, that there would be a 1/4 inch difference in my lip line. And I grabbed that tube of lipstick that had steeled me in the past. I will still wear red. Never one to face a challenge quietly, I formed a little plan. I still had stages to be on and business to close, and so like I've always done when terrified, I took it head on. As they cut through my lip over and over, I chronicled the surgery on Facebook, and I gave resources on how others could get checked. And I asked them to send me pictures of themselves wearing red lipstick. And I did it every step of the way wearing my signature red. My little stunts, I will still wear red, resulted in over 300 people getting into their derms that year, and 13 lives were saved. And the truth was, it allowed me to hide in plain sight. Being out there, I didn't have to deal with all of the loneliness. I could convince myself through the filter of Facebook that I was surrounded. But the only person I let close was Laura. We had been friends since she was making skanky comments in the back of my belly dancing class. And now she lived with me 3 days a week. She was the best auntie that Lily could have ever asked for. And she was running my office. She stood next to me and let me scream and fall apart and put myself back together. And she brought really great tequila. And just when I stopped feeling broken, it was her turn to break. We picked Lily up from camp, and in a blur that I could have never imagined, she didn't come home with us that day. She felt funny and she couldn't breathe. And when the blood clot hit her lung, all of us lost our air that day. I shattered again. I used the F word in her eulogy. And I had no choice. We were surrounded and alone. And I looked for that little girl who I once was in Jesus t-shirt number 7. I looked for that naive ability to walk towards the goal when you don't know what dangers lie ahead. But I had walked through all of them in just under 18 months. And so I just keep walking. Feelings on the outside, lonely and broken and beautiful and wholly unashamed of the pain. That's my resilience. Because there might be another soul out there who was breaking and alone. And to her I say, hi, my name's Marie. What's your shade?
Well, Yate, everyone. When it was established that I would be the first Native woman to speak through this platform, honestly, it propelled me into what I'll call layered emotions. I mentioned this at the top because this is and will remain a constant, repeated experience for me. Being someone's introduction to an authentic Native experience, or someone's gateway to Native spirituality, whatever that even means. being someone's first Native friend, colleague, partner. And without fail, nearly every time, I spend the majority of our first encounter providing some sort of history lesson, bringing to light just how I am here when they thought we were all dead, or at least still living on teepees on the res. It hasn't really felt like there's been a lot of time or room in my life to really consider the ways I hope to be seen and heard. The instinct has been to succumb to the pressures to embody Native women and not hold space for myself as a singular, independent, complex, anxious, problematic, queer, outspoken Native woman. The anxieties of the expectations of it all has honestly outweighed the value of my own voice into the last few years. Today, I am taking up time and space with my existence, my voice. And what I share today does not speak for all Indigenous or queer women. It is my own, and I share it with you in the most honest way possible. My name is Morningstar Angeline. I was born as Morningstar Angeline Wilson Chippewa to my mother, an Indigenous and white woman, and my father, Sean, a Chippewa Cree and Blackfeet man. At the age of 2 months old, Sean violently passed away from alcoholism, a death I still feel and see new ripples of today. My mother eventually remarried when I was 2 to Daniel, a Navajo man, and we moved from the New Mexico capital of Santa Fe to the Navajo Nation reservation border town of Gallup, New Mexico, just 3 hours away. I want to point out here just how complicated my indigeneity was already. My mother is a white passing Indigenous woman, and after the death of my father, Sean, I was somewhat disconnected from my father's family and tribe. In fact, it wouldn't be until just last year when my late grandmother was admitted to the hospital that I would reunite with that side of the family and begin healing through knowing one another. Daniel took me into his life and adopted me as a daughter in every way that mattered. His child became my sibling, and this is how I learned to build a solid family, even without blood. Despite our closeness though, Daniel didn't adopt me legally because the tribal governments, if I was legally adopted to the Navajo tribe, my ties to the Blackfoot and Chippewa tribes would have been taken away. At 2 years old, the decision had to be made about what boxes I would check for the rest of my life on a government document, about how I would be seen and exist within Indigenous spaces. Now, I always reflect on my childhood in Gallup fondly. Although the connotation with border towns is often negative for very valid reasons, I'm grateful to have grown up surrounded by the hidden abundances of those lands through ceremony, community, and family. When I think of my home, I think of flea markets, laughter, food, and ceremony, but most of all, a peace I've yet to find anywhere else, and I'm well-traveled. I grew up lower middle class, and my family was blessed enough to have a safe home, and it also provided a sanctuary for those who sought help from my dad. Daniel was not happy when anyone called him a medicine man, because he never claimed to be. I will say, however, that he led an extremely spiritual life, and he, along with my mother, ensured I had a solid cultural and spiritual foundation. I was taught the values of our elders and youth, as well as the worth of cultivating meaningful relationships with people outside of our own communities, cultures, and races. He taught me how to be tolerant and understanding of everyone, even the religious institutions that inflicted so much violence upon my people, my family. He traveled around the world, but remained a constant presence in my life nonetheless. When he was home and relatives would come over for help, I would drag my pillow from the end of the hallway and come sit by my father so I could watch him pray and talk. He never told me I couldn't do anything inside ceremony or outside because of my gender. He encouraged me to know my cultures, know these teachings so that they could help me, serve me, never limit me. He taught me I was just as much as a Dene Navajo woman as I was Blackfoot, Chippewa, or Latinx. And none of that felt as complicated as it was until second grade, when my mom decided to move to Los Angeles and my parents divorced. We always lived a very contemporary lifestyle, so it wasn't the technology that shocked me. Specifically, It was the social and political aspects of Western culture that assaulted my senses and sense of self. The extreme binaries of race, gender, and the toxicities that exist within all of those spaces, all the unwritten rules, the extreme sexualization of girls' bodies, and the general xenophobia. Even with the foundation I had, it felt impossible to maintain it, surrounded by materialism and consumption. I attended public schools, and although there aren't many Native peoples, although there are a ton of Native peoples in California, I didn't know them. I didn't see them. To me, at that young age, in those circumstances, they may as well have not existed, although I craved to be in their presence. I felt alone and raw as I became a target of racism for the first time. And as I moved through elementary to high school between several cities in the Los Angeles area, and I still managed to spend every summer with Gallup. But with all that constant movement, maintaining relationships or any connection became impossible. I felt like an outcast and found it hard to relate to most of my peers, always drifting towards older friends. And in the midst of all of this, I had a very private exploration into my sexuality, always being drawn to an eclectic array of peoples of different genders and backgrounds. Coming out to the Western world, however, felt like putting a target on my head. So one day I made the decision to hide that part of myself, and I did for several years. My reasoning was, just get through this. You're attracted to men too, so it's all good, right? And I guess I was right. I got through high school and began to feel free. I moved out of my mom's, attended college. In 2012, I felt the need to officially get out of California and come back to New Mexico. By 2013, I was cast in a New Mexico-based feature film, also my sister's film, Drunktown's Finest, and that solidified my love for acting in film. I was beginning to feel myself blossom in true colors. I felt authenticity coming. I was finding my voice, my passion, and although the following years were far from easy, I look back at them as good years. In 2016, Daniel booked his long-awaited knee replacement surgeries. There was a brewing sense of excitement after years of him being limited to not being able to travel because of his health. He told me, order your passport so you can go with me. And I took it seriously. I ordered it and I was ready to learn. I was so excited. After his second surgery, however, everything changed. The surgeries triggered heart attacks, and it was only 3 weeks later that he passed. Now, if I had to pick a single climactic big moment that changed my life and altered me literally beyond recognition, this was it. The universe went black. My entire being felt raw to the touch, and my entire identity was called into question by those closest to me and myself. It felt like the links to my ancestors, tribes, cultures were all buried in the ground with not only Daniel, but Sean as well. I stopped going to ceremony and grieved like I never want to grieve again. And all of this just increased my pain tolerance. I don't believe time heals everything. There are parts I glazed over, so many things I left out. Abuses, more deaths, and most of these wounds still feel fresh. And in the right time, they are just as raw as the day they were inflicted. But I am grateful to have grown the tolerance to endure because I'm finding myself again, finding those connections and lifelines to my ancestors, family, cultures, and identity, reclaiming something I thought I lost. And even in the midst of a pandemic and all the rising social and political tensions, I see the resilience of Indigenous people and that resilience within myself. In my lifetime, in my mother's, father's, grandmother's, great-grandmother's, we have witnessed everything we hold dear be destroyed, disrespected, and assaulted. The land, the youth, the elders, the sick our women, our non-binary and trans relatives, my indigenous relatives who have had the borders cross and assault them. We live in a post-apocalyptic society, this society. My existence here today should make us all feel hopeful that even in the midst of all of this chaos, we can find ourselves, find joy, and find ways to invest in our future generations. Find ways to heal.
Every morning, I get up, I go to the bathroom, I let my pet rabbit Trudy out of her pen, I make coffee and feed Trudy, and then I drink my coffee and plan my day. Every morning, in that order. Lord, help me if I make coffee before going to the bathroom or forget to let Trudy out of her pen, because it can literally throw me off for my whole day. Then I am guaranteed to forget my purse at home and need to get gas to get back home. And because my purse is at home, I can't get gas. So I end up on the phone crying to my mom. My morning routine is extremely important to me. I'm a grown woman with a clear case of ADHD, attention deficit disorder for anybody who's not in the know. I've had it since I was a kid, and it's made school and just life in general a little more difficult. An absolute struggle some days. Like sometimes I can't stay focused on anything. Wait, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I have ADHD. And being an adult with ADHD can be many, many things. Scary, frustrating, time-consuming, expensive, but often hilarious, if you don't take yourself too seriously. Let me walk you through a typical productive day. I sit on my couch and to enjoy my coffee, and I notice a slight layer of dust on the coffee table. So I start cleaning the living room. During that process, I find something that belongs in my bedroom. So I abort what I'm doing in the living room and take that item to the bedroom. While there, I realize that I have a ton of laundry to do, so I separate clothes and start a load. Then I head to the kitchen for a little snack and start emptying the dishwasher while it's heating up in the microwave. Then the microwave goes off and I leave a half-empty dishwasher to go eat. While I'm eating, I think to myself, wait, now what was I doing? Oh yeah. And I go back to cleaning and dusting the coffee table. And I continue to repeat this process all day long. And then my husband comes home to laundry hanging half out of the dryer, half of my living room completely dismantled, a spotless stove, but a half-empty dishwasher, and he finds me on a step stool in the bedroom with my head in the closet cleaning out the stuff from the top shelf that he's piled there for the last 6 months. The look of confused horror on his face is a sight to behold. There are other symptoms of ADHD besides just getting easily distracted. In case you haven't noticed, I talk a lot, to the point that it's sometimes physically exhausting not to talk. The more excited I am, the more I talk, the faster I talk, and the louder I talk, and I am already a naturally loud person. This falls under the hyperactivity part. I'm not usually disruptive or unable to sit still, but I get my energy out through talking. Two other exciting symptoms are hyperfocus and impulse control. Hyperfocus is amazing. Have you ever spent 8 hours on the internet searching for the perfect planner? No? Well, that's a good time. Moral of the story, there is no perfect planner, and you're just going to use it for 2 weeks before it ends up in a pile collecting dust with the other 9 planners you bought this year. Impulse control can be an expensive symptom. For most women, not all, but for many of us, it manifests as shopping. Not the marathon shopping you see in the movies, but those little purchases that pop up on the spur of the moment. I cannot tell you how much useless crap I have bought over the years just because I had to have it. Goodwill must love me. I can also be inattentive. Like last week, I finished a book that I had just bought on Amazon, and I went to put it away on the shelf. A feat in and of itself. And when I got to the shelf, I saw that I had already purchased a copy, and the unread copy was staring me right in the face from the bookshelf. And this is the second time I've done this since quarantine has started. I'm also pretty sure Alexa hates me. I ask her to tell me the forecast and immediately zone out as soon as she starts talking. She has to repeat herself like 4 times before I leave in the morning. I used to be very self-conscious about my quirks when I was younger, but I did a lot of work to get past it and realized that I had to embrace them. I accept that my brain functions differently than a neurotypical brain. ADHD brains don't process dopamine as effectively as a neurotypical brain, which means that we relate to the world a little differently. But there are ways to combat these symptoms. Post-it notes are my best friend. The more obnoxiously bright, the better. If I have to remember to take something to work with me, I slap a Post-it note on the door at eye level, and then I'm guaranteed to take it. If I have to remember to do something I don't normally do, I put a Post-it note where I see it, usually on the coffee maker. If I'm not careful, I can wallpaper my entire apartment with Post-it notes. Routines are essential too, like my morning routine. As long as my morning routine goes smoothly, then the life can throw whatever it wants at me, and I'll just roll with it. My bedtime routine is designed to help slow my brain down. I once heard somebody say having ADHD was like having a Ferrari brain with Pinto brakes. And it's true. I can go down a long rabbit hole of crazy thoughts, and my brain thinks the best time to do this is when I'm falling asleep, which is perfect because lack of sleep affects dopamine production. So you can see where this is going. Having ADHD can be a blessing too. I am extremely creative in all aspects of my life, and I love that. And as a teacher, I'm able to relate to my differently abled students on a level that recognizes them, and I'm able to help them succeed. I'm not gonna lie, being an adult with ADHD can be difficult, but if I only focus on the struggle, then everything becomes negative. So I choose to laugh every time I walk into the wall in my apartment that hasn't moved since the last time I walked into that wall. Or if I can't find my glasses that are sitting right on top of my head.
At 12:54 a.m. on March 3rd, 2002, my life was changed forever. I brought into this world a beautiful, innocent baby boy, my pride and joy. Then and there began my journey as the Black mother of a Black son. I knew what it looked like, what people have thought of me. I was only 18, unwed, still a child myself. My grandmother and mother were young mothers, and I hoped that I would break the cycle. But that was not the case. What people didn't know, however, is that when I was 13 years old, I was told by my doctor that it would be difficult for me to ever have children, that bearing a child was out of the realm of possibilities for me. The word mother was something that I never thought I would get to call myself. But then at the age of 18, I lost my virginity. One time. That's all it took. Months after that event, I can feel my body changing. Deep down, I knew I was pregnant. I was scared. I was told that it wouldn't be possible by my doctor. I was afraid of the questions that would be raised by my family, my friends, and my circle of support. I was afraid what people would think when they saw me and how they would treat me. Looking back at it now, that fear was nothing compared to what lie ahead. Not for me, but for my baby. My son is now 18 years old, so humble and one brilliant child. He recently graduated high school and dreams of going to college to work in mass media, focusing on sound production. He has his whole life ahead of him. And every day, I watch him walk out the door. I worry about what people see when they look at him. I fear that he is viewed as public enemy #1 because he is a Black male. That despite the courteous, kind, and polite person for everyone that he would come across, that he poses a threat. And even worse, right now, he's an essential worker working at our local grocery store. At work, he has to wear his mask every day, protect himself and those around him. But this simple act is not viewed as him being the conscientious person he is. When he walks into the store with his backpack and his mask, people would never assume that he is an employee of the store. They would jump to conclusions. It is the depiction of the Black male criminal in the news that is so dominant. I could actually see the impact in people's eyes as they pass him in the aisle. Never did I think that my son would have to live in a state of civil unrest. My grandfather did, and he fought so that we could have a better future. Not just his children and their families, but the families of the oppressed. I know that this is not the future he envisioned for his great-grandson. Here in Athens, Georgia, rallies and protests turn violent quickly. My son, my own flesh and blood, is a target. I knew that as a Black male, he would be a target at some point in his life, but he is barely an adult. And I hope that I have done my best in preparing him for what is happening in the world right now. It terrifies me that I have to warn him for when, not if, he finds himself face to face with racist groups and law enforcement just because he is breathing in doing things that he has equal rights to do, like everyone else. There was a sentence in an article from a journal I had researched that was jarring. According to the April 2019 demography peer-reviewed journal, homicides are the leading deaths in Black young people ages 15 to 34. Homicides. As a student, finding that statement while researching was jarring. As a mother of a Black male, was utterly terrifying. As much as I want to dispute those findings, I knew that it was true. My darling boy has an equal percentage of being successful to being a statistic. Why is it that when someone can show such promise in their future, that they have to be so painstakingly mindful of their surroundings so they can get to see that future? I've asked myself many times over the years. I never felt this type of fear for myself. I got to enjoy my childhood and roam with a sense of freedom. I mourn for my son, that at his age, at the cusp of his independence, he is facing restrictions by a global health crisis, restrictions by racism in the streets, restrictions by the burdens and weight of the world. He will have to bear it. James is 18, but I still see him as a 5-year-old child who relied on his mother to protect him from all the baddies out there. I should not have to continue to text him every hour when he is out with his friends, but I do because I want to make sure that my son comes home alive. I want him to have so much independence, but I am scared because if I cannot protect him from the world, how would he make it? He is my only child. He's all that I have. After James, I had thought about having more children. A few years ago, I suffered a miscarriage, so I know it's still difficult for me. But at times, I long for more. But despite the personal struggle, I worry if it is selfish for me to try. If I am frightened to have my son face the world, would I want to start over with another young child in this world? The struggle is real, and I don't have the answers. We grew up together, James and I just pray each and every day that my son doesn't end up in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong people, that he can have the freedom to decide his own future, that I can go to sleep every night knowing that he is safe.
A few years ago, I was speaking at a Bigfoot conference. Yes, they are a real thing. There are several that happen all over the country where researchers come together to talk about the latest findings in the search for Bigfoot. So here I was speaking to 100 people about how the search for the big furry guy is a worthwhile educational topic to explore with kids. After my talk, I signed some books and realized that just a few years ago, I had no idea Bigfoot conferences even existed, nor did I ever picture myself speaking at one. The journey to looking for Sasquatch, or squatching as it's called, began when I was a kid. My mom went to the bookstore and asked the bookseller for something to read to me at bedtime. Without hesitation, the woman handed my mom not a book on cute elephants or cuddly penguins, but she handed her The Hobbit and told my mom to read it to me every night, which my mom did. And those nights spent cuddling in bed, hearing about those epic battles and grand adventures are some of my favorite childhood memories. It also left a strong impression on me because as I got older, I wanted to live a life that was full of fantasy and adventure. So in college, I switched my degree from international relations that I was taking because I wanted to be a spy, even though I didn't like the idea of getting tortured for information because I knew I'd crack immediately. So I changed my degree from international relations to theater performance studies. I thought, well, if I can't be an actual spy, I might as well play one on TV. As I approached, after I graduated college, I lived in London, LA, and finally New York City, working my tail off, which really meant that I was working hard at my day jobs and doing very little acting. I just couldn't seem to get anywhere with it. Now, I knew that show business was a tough business and acting was nice work if you could get it, and I just couldn't get it. As I approached my 35th birthday, I realized that I was single, broke, and unsuccessful. I had developed a horrible case of stage fright because I had faced so much rejection that my body froze at the mere prospect of encountering more. I knew I had a creative voice, but I had no idea how to use it. I had tried commercials, improv, audiobook, stage, TV, and one very ill-advised audition for a traveling acrobat show, even though I'm not an acrobat. Needless to say, I didn't get that job. I couldn't gain traction anywhere and wondered constantly what I was doing wrong. Then one day I was sitting on set for a short film I was acting in and started telling a fellow actor how lost I was feeling. He listened intently and at the end of my story said, "You need to go traveling." I asked him why he thought that and he said, "It sounds like you don't like the life you're living, so you need to change the channel. And the best way to change the channel on your life is through traveling. It gets you out of your funk because you are deep in the funk and you need to get out." As soon as I heard those words, I decided that he was right. I needed to get as far away from my funk as possible. So I took on extra hours at work and saved up enough money to go on a hiking tour through New Zealand where I'd visit the sets for the Hobbit movies. My life had become so unadventurous that I really needed to do something epic. Now, I was a little nervous traveling alone, so I asked my mom if she supported me in doing the trip. She said she thought my money would be better spent on a therapist, but figured that flying as far away from my problems as the earth would allow might have some positive effect too. So I packed my bags, spent a week in Australia, and then hopped over to New Zealand for my Hobbit tour. Some people say there are moments in life that shift the trajectory of your life forever, and this was definitely one of those moments. I told a fellow hiker about my funk, and he said that if I really wanted to make a change, the best way to do that was to look at the evidence of my life and shift it from there. So I spent that night looking at the evidence of my life. I had a steady job as a Pilates teacher that paid my bills fine. And when I wasn't teaching or taking acting classes, I was sitting in Brooklyn coffee shops. Looking at that evidence, I thought, so how can I be creative within that? And I realized that I could write. And everyone else at Brooklyn coffee shops were writing novels. I might as well too. And the very next day, as we were hiking through the New Zealand mountains, an idea for a story popped right into my head. I began writing that night, not even sure I would like the process, and was tickled to discover that I adored writing. I felt happy. I didn't have to worry about my stage fright. and best of all, I was creating again. Within months, I had a book finished. It didn't go anywhere because I discovered in hindsight that I basically wrote The Hobbit, but it didn't matter because I already had an idea for a new book. See, I had read an article in the paper about Charlie Sheen, who had put together a hunting party to go to Alaska to find the otter man. I thought, who is the otter man and what does Charlie Sheen want with him? And after doing some research, I discovered that the otter man was a cryptid, or a legendary animal that might be real, and that set me off on a whole new tangent for my writing. That book got me an agent, and within months I had a book deal, which took me away from being a failed actor and turned me into a published author. I always knew that I wanted to live a life of fantasy and adventure. It just took me a while to realize that there were many ways to do that. And when I look at my life now, it makes so much sense that this is what I do. I just had to pivot my focus a bit to get here. I am an author of books for 8 to 12-year-olds filled with epic battles and high-tailed adventures about legendary animals. I speak at Bigfoot conferences about how exploring these animals gets kids interested in reading and science. And perhaps tonight, a parent will be reading one of my books to their child, and that child will decide that they too want to live a life of exploration and adventure.
Recently, someone reminded me, you are allowed to be here. Those words sucker punched me right in the chest. You are allowed to be here. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe, like I got the wind knocked out of me. And when I found air again, the tears just gushed out simultaneously with my quivering exhale. You survived, and you're still here. Oh my gosh, the guilt. The conflicted emotions about still being here. I didn't even know I was harboring it all until she said it. You know, I've done the healing work. I've addressed what happened. I've talked about it over and over and feel like I've processed every stage of feelings I possibly could. It's been 5 years since my husband committed suicide. And until that one phrase was spoken, I had no idea that I felt guilty for being alive. I look back at this event that split my life in two, who I was before and who I'm trying so hard to be after. How do I cope with knowing that I'm still alive and he isn't? So I did what felt natural to me and I started writing. I wrote a letter to me. Before being a widow and a single mom, before living in a new place, building a business, establishing a new normal, before I had to figure out how to fall in love again, and before I felt guilty for being alive. Dear Lisa, I promise I see you. I see you in those weeks leading up to that tragic event, the one you sensed was possible but couldn't quite pinpoint. Would violence be turned on you, the kids, him, all of the above? I remember your fears. I recall that frantic desperation as you tried to file a restraining order and the hopelessness because it wouldn't stop his cryptic verbal threats of, don't worry, you'll get your happy ending. I understand the rage and numbing loneliness knowing your marriage was crumbling and this imbalanced, unrecognizable person was yelling at you that it was all your fault. I want to run and catch you that fateful morning in December as you crumble to the sidewalk after handing the police officer the keys to your house, so they can go in and see if Steve followed through on his threat. I will never forget your piercing screams when the officer comes back out and says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, it's too late." You wonder if you'll ever be you again. I get it. You wonder if you can come back from the paralyzing shock, the thick life fog that will follow you around for over a year. I regret those few weeks in June when you consider following in Steve's footprints, toying with the idea that maybe he had the right idea after all. Yes, it'll be terrifying. You won't recognize yourself in the dark places that your mind will take you, but I urge you to keep listening to that faint voice of truth and reasoning that's desperately screaming, your kids need you. They don't deserve another dead parent, and they don't deserve any of this. And please stay close to those core girlfriends who will fight for your resilience and threaten to camp outside your door every single night. Remember to love and appreciate those friends who will take time off of work to drive you to all your appointments to figure out, will Prozac or herbs pull you out of your deep well of loss? And those friends and family who will laugh with you, but also take you seriously when you decide, nah, I'd rather up my therapy sessions, work with a trauma specialist, meditate, and yoga my way through this grief. Spoiler alert, for you, those will actually work. I feel you, I get it. 14 years of marriage to a man who was once your best friend, before life and stress and God knows what internal imbalances hijacked that person you had vowed forever with far away and long ago. And I applaud you for committing to those 4 months of weekly family therapy sessions that will prove necessary and beneficial for the kids. At 8 and 11 years old, they'll grumble, of course, and learn at an early age that talking about feelings and memories and death is so hard. It hurts. I'm hugging you as you remain neutral in the challenge of hearing their adoring stories of their papa, their dad, as you sit there reeling with anger at what he ultimately did to them, abandon them. I'm so proud of you for handling it with grace, though, because you do. Because they deserve to preserve those memories of their father, the one who loved them with all his heart and strived to create a loving, kind, and fun-filled environment for them. And girl, I hold you up during the worst moments, the funeral, one of the most surreal days of your life. And that call with the Organ Harvest Center on the day he died, and you had to approve each and every body part and organ they had to check off the itemized list. Just know that you'll get through it. Know that unbeknownst to you, you are equipped from a lifetime of growth to handle this. Know that healing will come with time, but most importantly, with awareness and gratitude. Yes, gratitude for all the shit that happened and all the blessings that were always right there. It's hard to see that right now because you've stuffed down a lot of painful emotions for longer than you'd like to admit. You've given the finger to the gratitude and love you once knew because you're so hateful of him, your life, and the situation. This isn't the happily ever after you envisioned. And the hardest part is having to accept there won't be, not in the way that you pictured it to be. I'm here on the other side now, writing this to ask you to please have faith. Believe in a happily ever after, just not this one. Hold on to hope and patience to see it through to the peace, understanding, and compassion on the other side. It's not perfect where I'm standing, but it is brighter and better than where you are now. There's breathing space. There's growth. The sun is shining. People love you. You will relearn healthier love and what that feels like for you. Trust me, it's going to feel foreign at first. It's going to be hard. Friends make it easy, and certain guys will re-trigger all that shit. But we can laugh about it, you and I, on our journey together, the one that keeps going and evolving. So please, don't give up. It's liberating to believe you are allowed to be here, to have hope for a future without Steve in it, and to possibly find love again. Because of everything you are able to endure, I am allowed to live my life in joy and uncertainty. How empowering to know I am allowed to be here after everything that happened. So thank you. Because of you, I am here. I am seen. I am safe. And everything will be okay. I love you. You've got this. With all my heart, Lisa.
There I was in my radiant blue gown, trying to look composed, with sticky underpants and sweat dripping from my nose, as I took my turn strolling down the runway at the 1976 Junior Miss Beauty Pageant. It was the hottest day in August, and we were having a beauty pageant in a high school auditorium with no air conditioning. Perfect conditions for armpit stains and mascara dripping down our cheeks. I was still trying to recover from the horrific embarrassment of my talent performance. I stood on stage for what seemed like an eternity, posed in my pink gingham dress and my huge pink bow, waiting for the opening strains of Tea for Two, so I could dazzle the audience with my perfectly choreographed and overly rehearsed tap number. I waited and waited. The audience and I stared awkwardly at each other, and I started to panic because I knew it looked like I didn't know what I was doing. Suddenly, my dance music screamed through the auditorium at top volume, not at the beginning of my dance, mind you, but in the middle of the song. Are you kidding me? I caught on and kept going, but I was totally mortified. So, as I glued on my fake smile and promenaded down the runway feeling disgusting and shiny from sweat, I started thinking to myself, this is total bullshit. The only reason I prayed to hear them call out my name as the Junior Miss of Lancaster County was to make my mother proud. Entering the local pageants was her idea, not mine. Mother was the preacher's wife in a small town in Pennsylvania, and she was consumed with the image our family portrayed. To her, presentation was everything, as were other people's opinions of us. My mother always made her entrance down the church aisle each Sunday, dressed to the nines for all to see, as she paraded to her seat in the front row. Every Christmas, she'd say, "Okay, Shelley, what shall we do for your Christmas dress this year?" We'd choose a pattern and material and then have the seamstress down the street make me a one-of-a-kind frock so that I could be seen next to Mom in her Christmas finery. I was the obedient Miss Priss, as my mother called me, little Miss Shelley Vought, who never spoke up or made a fuss, but believed that my worth was based on how beautiful and proper other people thought I was. Little did I realize as a teenager how damaging, self-abandoning, and futile that quest was. But that week at the Junior Miss pageant, I started noticing a voice in my head. That voice started questioning why I was standing there, trying to prove that I was better than every other 16-year-old on that stage. We were all just growing and changing, riddled with self-doubt and each with our own talent. Yet only one of us would be publicly told she was enough when the MC called her name. They never did crown Shelley Vought as Junior Miss for Lancaster County, and I slunk out of there vowing never to enter another stupid pageant again. From then on, I tried to ignore that voice that popped in my head from time to time. That tiny voice of dissent that would seep out at other moments when I didn't agree with Mother's decisions. Like that time she forced me to go to the dermatologist to get pills for a pretty face. I argued with my mother for the first time, telling her that I was fine with how I looked and no one cared if I had acne. But Mom won that battle, and I had to hush that voice again. That voice was dormant for a long time, but it reappeared some years later when I realized my boyfriend Larry had cheated on me. I was so used to keeping her quiet, afraid of what people might think if I ever spoke what I was thinking out loud. But I was older now, and my mother wasn't there to censor me. My feelings were so hurt. I was so tired of his lies. I couldn't keep my thoughts to myself anymore, and I just exploded. This woman's voice that I barely recognized raged out of me. I am done being your doormat. This is over. And I stormed out, fuming and shaking. Who was that woman who had emerged from my insides and told Larry to shove it? I completely scared myself. I was a 32-year-old woman who had always hoped for a husband and children. If I so wanted a relationship and family, then why did I allow this assertive persona of mine to ruin it? What the hell was I doing? It took me several more years to come to terms with this woman who was dying to get out. I was struggling to hold on to little Shelley, remain obedient, and stay on track for the life I was supposed to be living. But this new woman emerged more and more. Let's call her Michelle. This strange part of myself that I didn't recognize, this woman of extraordinary self-possession, sporadically and randomly continued to appear throughout my life. Years later, I was engaged to Mark, an actor who ghosted me one summer while he was studying theater in upstate New York. I was devastated, but followed our plan and traveled to North Carolina to perform opera, all the while waiting for a letter from Mark, which never came. Though I was heartbroken at his radio silence, I debated whether I could accept an offer for a full-ride scholarship to a master's program in vocal performance in South Carolina. While little Shelley thought it would be inappropriate to make this move without Mark, I heard Michelle shouting, "Yes!" and accepting the offer. It was Michelle that took control, dumped Mark, and headed to South Carolina a few weeks later. It felt great. The more I got away from being the people pleaser Shelley and embraced the independent Michelle, the more I found myself living a full, rich life guided by my own heart. I was able to divorce my husband for his unfaithful and disrespectful choices, and have maintained my position as voice professor at a university where he still teaches right down the hall. I threw caution to the wind and started dating women, which felt natural and beautiful to me. I was even married to a woman for several years. Michelle kept showing up and guiding me in new, exciting directions. I guess she had been hiding out in my closet all along. Finally, the preacher's daughter, Shelley, lost all power to hold the door shut, and Michelle busted down that closet door, unable to hold back. From then on, Michelle became the leading lady in all of my life. In my late 40s, I created a one-woman show called Madame Monsieur. It is no coincidence that this show parallels my own evolution of Shelley into Michelle. I start the show dressed as opera diva in gown, baubles, and bangles, performing soprano favorites drawn from opera and musical theater, only to return after intermission in dapper, dashing drag to perform the guys. Let me tell you, the way Michelle puts out the show is way different than little Miss Chris Shelley. In my show, I embrace all parts of who I am. This strong, self-assured warrior of a woman, Michelle, has led me through my life, showing up just when I needed her on my adventures. I've been the Cincinnati Pickle Lady, owned my own singing telegram business, performed, lectured, and recorded around the world, survived sarcoma and breast cancer, made it through 2 tough divorces, to be a single mom to my remarkable gay son, Nick, who performs as a drag queen. I am so proud that he can be true to himself and doesn't have to shush the voices in his head, worried what his mother might think. The night my show opened, there were only 6 people in the audience. The second night, 0. Now, 14 years later, I performed to full houses nightly, and I now end the show wearing a Wonder Woman costume as I use musical theater and comedy to open minds and empower others. I found my superpower of independence, which was always there once I left my scared, self-doubting, people-pleasing self behind. It took me a long time to figure out how to do things my way, and that's how I plan to do things from now on.
Yeah.
Woo!